Ford Skunkworks have turned out some of the craziest projects throughout the years, from the insane 427 sock that was created inside of just 90 days, to even the classified rebirth of the iconic GT40. It is safe to say that behind the scenes, Ford has always been working on something special, and the early 2000s were no different. Ford was about to unveil the iconic 390 horsepower supercharged Terminator Cobra, which would become an icon in its own right. But there was another special Mustang being built in the shadows that would have changed everything. And gone was the new modular Ford V8. And what sat under the hood of this experimental Mustang was an all-aluminum 351 cubic inch V10 power plant that was to be the new gold standard for Ford performance. This is the story of the insane V10 powered Mustang that the world was robbed of. The new Boss 351. Now, if you owned a Ford truck in the late 90s or early 2000s, then you would know that this was the time period that Ford had just released their 6.8-liter Triton V10 engine for their heavy trucks. Now, this V10 was essentially the Ford 5.4-liter single overhead cam V8 that was found in many trucks, just with 2 cylinders added to the front of it. Being a V10, this sounds similar in application to the V10 that would have been in the new Boss 351 prototype, but in actuality, it was not even close to the same engine. This new Boss 351 was built to offer giant killer performance out of a Mustang, and sticking a 650-pound tall deck boat anchor of a V10 into the then current Mustang platform was a surefire way to create a car that would somehow handle worse and cost way more money. When this new Boss 351 prototype project started in 2002, it was essentially the end of the era for the new edge generation of Mustang, which itself was essentially the final hurrah for the base Fox body chassis that was unveiled all the way back in 1979. And they wanted to go out with a bang. So the team of small engineers at Ford got back to the drawing board to create a new V10 that could live up to the challenge of creating a supercar killer power plant. Ford was gung-ho on the modular V8 power plant at the time, sticking it in just about everything from Crown Vics to Mustangs. This V8 was the 281 cubic inch 4.6-liter mod motor, which came in 2 key forms. The single overhead cam was the workhorse V8 that was found in the Crown Vic, all the way up to the Mustang GT, which at the time made 260 horsepower. The aluminum dual overhead cam version was reserved for specialty Mustangs like the Cobras and the Mach 1, which I happen to personally own. These dual overhead cam 4-valve per cylinder 4.6s made over 300 horsepower and 300 foot-pounds of torque, and they were much more rev-happy than the single overhead cam ones were, which made these a great base for the new V10 to be based on. There was just one problem: money. Ford did not want to put serious money behind this new experimental V10 power plant and this project in general, so things had to be done on a shoestring budget, essentially after hours. With this front of mind, the engineers at Ford took 2 aluminum 4.6-liter V8 blocks, cut them up, and essentially joined them together, making a new 10-cylinder version of the 4.6 that now displaced 5.8 liters or 351 cubic inches. And this cycle would remain true for the majority of this engine's development, as they would do the same for the cylinder heads. They took the castings for the 5.4-liter dual overhead cam V8 Cobra R heads and modified them to fit the new 10-cylinder mill. The Cobra R was the highest performance naturally aspirated modular V8 that Ford made, and it was really the parts guinea pig for this new V10, sacrificing its internals, manifold, and pretty much a bit of everything to be cut and modified for this new V10. Custom billet cams and a custom billet crankshaft were also created specifically for this prototype to help tie off the full hardware package. The next issue was on the software and tuning side. See, this V10 now being based off the Mustang's short deck 4.6-liter and not the Triton V10 meant that the existing V10 electronic control unit could not be used with this new V10, which posed quite the dilemma. A new ECU was out of the budget, so what did the engineers at Ford end up doing? Well, through one way or another, they figured out that if they could take 2 V10 Triton ECUs and convinced them that they were each only controlling a bank of 5 cylinders that was somehow able to work. And the result? 426 horsepower at 6,500 RPM and 400 or so foot-pounds of torque at around 5,000 RPM, which for the early 2000s naturally aspirated, that was a big deal, especially when compared to the 385 horsepower LS6 motor that was found in the Corvette Z06 at the time. And Ford's new V10 likely had some more power left on the table that could have been squeezed out with a better ECU solution, let alone further reworked heads and cams to put an even bigger gap between its competitors. But now that this experimental V10 was done, it was time to stick it into something and show Ford's top brass what it could really do. Luckily, Ford had a test mule of a Cobra R Mustang that they were getting ready to send to the crusher, which made the perfect transplant candidate for this new V10, especially since it already used a variety of Cobra parts already. With some suspension modifications to accommodate for the new 10-cylinder in the Cobra R, the transplant was successful. Ford had themselves a running and driving prototype that was built on the best setup Mustang chassis that Ford had to offer. Backing up the rev-hungry V10 was a 6-speed manual and a 383 rear-geared posit traction rear end. In the quarter mile, this new Boss 351 could rip off sub-12-second quarter mile times with ease. And it proved to be faster in a straight line than the Cobra R and even the 0304 supercharged Terminator Cobras. In the turns, there isn't much I can find in terms of its handling characteristics, but I would have to assume it handled similar to a stock Cobra R, which again was the pinnacle of Mustang performance in the early 2000s. And the best part was the exterior. You would never know what this car was hiding under the hood just by looking at it. The prototype car looked like any other silver GT Mustang with some slight modifications, like the Cobra R hood and a set of saline wheels. But one crack of the throttle and the secret was out. This was not your typical 4.6. For a relatively low-budget prototype, the V10 wowed the few that got to drive it, and even impressed the top brass at Ford, who pushed for a larger displacement prototype to be made for potential future exploration in other high-performance vehicles, like the Shelby GR1 concept. But tragically, nothing ever came of that, and Ford's short love affair with the V10 engine architecture as a whole died out in the mid-2000s, leaving the affectionately named Boss 351 prototype as the only one of its kind. Which makes you wonder, looking at how the Mustang has evolved today, with 480 horsepower on tap from that glorious high-revving Coyote V8, what could that car be like with 2 more cylinders? If the V10 had lived on and had now been transformed into a 6.2-liter, 600-plus horsepower, high-winding V10, I think we would be looking back at this Boss 351 not just as an obscure prototype, but as the beginning of a new lineage of performance ponies that had an exotic V10 flair to them. But let me know in the comments down below, would you ever consider buying a V10 Mustang, or is the V8 the only engine that belongs in one? And that is the crazy true story of the V10 powered Mustang that almost was. Thank you all for watching another episode of our Rare Cars documentary series. If you enjoyed this video, we would greatly appreciate it if you could drop a like and also share this video with other enthusiasts. Also, please make sure that you are subscribed to the Rare Cars YouTube channel and smash that notification bell for more documentary style videos just like this on the world's most interesting cars. Until next time, enthusiasts.